Today, I'm going to teach you how to overcome your fear of public speaking. I'm going to go over many different methods. Some of them might work better than others, but I want to give you the entire toolbox so you can try each of them and see which one works best for you. I guarantee you, at least one or two of these methods will be a home run for you. Most of them in general will work pretty well if you just give them enough time, but they work really well, and I want to share it with you. The first thing we're going to talk about is the rehearsal process. So let's say you've got a presentation coming up and you're going to step on stage, you're going to talk about a topic. What most people do and what they shouldn't do is, let's say there's about a day to 5 days left till they step on stage. What they will do is they will put the slides together in this time. Usually it's the last hour or the last day when they do all this stuff. And then at the very most, they'll work on the images, they'll change up the text a bit, they will read it in their head, and then they'll show up on stage. So it tends to happen when they do this, they will wing the presentation, but they'll say to themselves, hey, yeah, I prepared for this, I practiced my presentation, I did it, but then they're really nervous, they don't really know if they're going to do well, they don't know if the material sounds good, and the presentation doesn't go as well. Now, even if you are the best public speaker in the world, and I'm guilty of this, you think you can do really well because you know the topic. But the issue here is you've prepared in terms of preparing the slides, but you haven't practiced. You haven't rehearsed. That's like saying, I wrote a song, the song is on a piece of paper, I wrote all the lyrics, but I've never said the words out loud. How ridiculous would that sound? Of course, you need to say the words out loud. You need to make sure the tone is correct. It sounds good. The performance goes well with the words. There are pauses in between. You're emphasizing certain words. So you need to rehearse it out loud so that your body knows what you're talking about. Now, one of the biggest reasons that people are afraid of public speaking or speaking in front of an audience is because of uncertainty. They just don't know what will happen, and they don't know if they're going to do well. And you can think about this in your own situation. A lot of times when we're on stage or when we're about to step on stage, the thoughts that we have in our head are around, how will I do? Will I remember my slides? Am I going to blank out? What if this happens? What if that happens? It's all about our own performance or other people's perception of our performance. Why? Because we have a very low amount of confidence that we are going to do well because the uncertainty is so high. We haven't proven to ourselves that we will do good. Why is that? Because we just haven't rehearsed it. We haven't said the material out loud. So one of the biggest issues that people have is they just don't do rehearsal. Rehearsal is not putting the slides together. Rehearsal is not reading the slides. Rehearsal is also not winging it on stage. Rehearsal is you going into the motion of what you will talk about. So here's what my rehearsal process looks like. It's divided into 3 different blocks. 1, 2, 3. The first block is going to be me structuring. So this is, what is the message of my presentation or speech? What am I trying to relay to the audience? What will I talk about first, second, or 3 first, first, second, and third? What is the order in which I will talk about things? First, you need to know what the message is, because most people will forget 99% of what you say, but they will remember the message. So you decide what comes first, what comes second, what comes third. You work on this first. You first structure it. You don't work on the content at all. Now you know I'm going to open with the problem, then I'm going to talk about the alternatives in the market, then I'm going to talk about our product, our solution, whatever your presentation is about. You will structure it first. Once you have structured it, then you will start preparing the content. So this is your slides, your text, whatever material you have. Quick note on this, you don't want to make this a giant paragraph or a book or a manual, and this is a big mistake people make. They turn their slides into a manual because they want to be able to send that manual to other people. You hear this a lot, hey, send me the slide deck. If the purpose is you just read the slide deck and you know everything, then it's a manual. It is not meant as a visual aid. In presentations, Whatever's on screen is a visual aid. The speaker does most of the speaking. The slides just demonstrate what they're talking about. So there's not supposed to be a lot of information on there. So now you prepare the content. You have already structured your speech. Then you get to saying it out loud. This is the part that most people never do. I guarantee it. If they do it one time, two times, three, it's just not enough. If you were giving the most important presentation of your life and you wanted to make sure you knew every single part of the speech, you hit every line, you talk about every statistic, how many times would you practice? Way more than once, twice, or three times. When I went to my TED Talk and I was practicing, I practiced the entire thing start to finish. It was 18 minutes, 200 times. 200 times. Now, I know this is not the most practical thing in the world, especially if you work in corporate. You're not going to get the chance to rehearse 200 times for a presentation or a speech. But how about we start with 20 times or 30 times, or depending on how important the presentation is. If you want it to go well, you really have to put in the time. So here's what the timeline would look like. You would structure it well in advance, as early on as you possibly can. Then you would start adding content into the presentation. And when you say it out loud, what you will realize is some of the content doesn't really sound good. It sounds a bit whiff, sounds a bit odd. Then you go back and restructure it because now you said it out loud. It sounds a little wonky. You change the structure. Then you start saying, then you change the material and then you say it out loud again. And then because of this rehearsal process, the presentation improves. And at the same time, your confidence improves because now you know that you have said this so many times, you know the material inside out. So a lot like now, if I asked you to just tie your shoelaces, you don't really have to think about tying your shoelaces. You just can because you've done it so many times. The thought doesn't really occur to you. The same way if I asked you to narrate your ABCs to me, you'd be able to do it, no problem. You don't have to think about it. So imagine your presentation material the same way. When you rehearse it time and time again, you put your body into it, you know the material so well that you don't really get nervous or worried about it because the certainty of you doing well is so high. You already know it, right? If someone asks you your birthday or your name, you know it. No one else knows it more than you do, so you're not going to be nervous. So the first thing we must do is to get our rehearsal process in check. Prepare the structure ahead of time, content ahead of time, and the last week or the majority of the time, just say the words out loud, start to finish. I have a client I'm working with right now in Dubai, and the only thing we did to prepare for his interview coming up is we just did the entire 10-minute interview over and over and over and over and over again. It was boring. He kept saying the same thing again, but by the time the interview came up, he was so into it. He knew every single word, and his confidence was sky high simply because he had done it so many times. The confidence was there. Okay, so number one, we have our rehearsal process. The second thing we're going to talk about is just the biology. So what actually happens in the body? Now, I'm not a doctor, but I know enough about what happens in the body when you are afraid of public speaking. If you just understand the mechanics that your body is going through, it becomes very, very easy to deal with it. So let's look at a quick graph here. Let's take your anxiety here, and let's put time over here. Now, we'll take this initial period as before you step on stage, all right? So for most people, what happens is the anxiety is super high right before, and it keeps going, and then as they continue talking, it dips a little bit. But then there's a point here in about 30 seconds or maybe a minute where they start to realize that now they're anxious, they're feeling nervous. Oh, can other people tell I'm nervous? What has happened? Now this goes back up. And then this happens again and it goes back up. And then it happens again and it goes back up. And then it becomes this vicious cycle where you are nervous because you're nervous. You're nervous about the fact that you're nervous. So because you're judging yourself at each one of these moments, it keeps getting worse because not only are you performing in front of people, but you're also self-punishing. Like, oh, why is this happening? These people not like me, blah, 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 blah. and you're making yourself even more agitated, okay? Now, let's compare this to a seasoned public speaker. What's interesting is the first part of it is going to look exactly the same. You're going to feel the same amount of anxiety, and as you continue talking, after 30 seconds, a minute, the anxiety tends to go down a little bit because when you're on stage, your body's preparing you, you have adrenaline flowing in your blood, and that's completely natural. But what happens is, at this point here, the seasoned public speaker knows they're supposed to be anxious. They know what their body does when they're anxious. They know they start to shake. They know their mouth dries up. It's the expected response. So what they don't do here is get nervous about what's happening. They don't judge themselves. Oh, why am I nervous? What is going on? And I'll tell you this, to this day, even if I'm prepared, I know in the first 30 seconds, usually my mouth dries up quite a bit and I stutter on a word here or there. Or I choose the wrong word. And it almost always happens to me. And because I know it happens, it doesn't really throw me off. But if every time I went up there and said, oh, I hope that doesn't happen, I hope I don't stutter in the first sentence, if I keep doing that, now there's more uncertainty. So a good public speaker knows for the first 30 seconds to 60 seconds, I'm going to feel nervous, and that's just my body getting ready. Every time I'm doing something important, my body will pump adrenaline in my body to prepare itself, and that's completely normal. So what happens at this point, it just starts to fade away. Exact same situation, could be the exact same person, but the difference in anxiety simply comes down to perception. There's a great book called The Expectation Effect, which talks about what you expect will drastically change how you experience something. Regardless of your practice, regardless of your skill set, a really good resource that I found was Dr. Alan Goldberg. He teaches Olympic level athletes, and we're going to talk about it in just a bit, but he said what they focus on right before or right when they're going into their performance significantly impacts how well they do, because some people are so worried about not winning the match or not doing well that they can't do everything their body knows how to do. So here our goal is to teach ourselves what our body is doing. Hey, it doesn't matter how much public speaking I've done. It doesn't matter how amazing I am at this. I will always get anxious. If you just know how your body responds, you're less judgmental because you're looking at yourself like a scientist. What is my body doing? My body is trying to get me ready. But what we do is, because we feel something in our body, that creates thoughts in our head. So it'll say, oh, because I'm feeling this, I must not be prepared, or I must not be doing really well, or people must hate me. So what we don't have is familiarity with that feeling. We're just not familiar with what we're supposed to feel in that situation. So our mind starts creating descriptions around it. Oh, you're feeling anxious? That must be bad. And if that's bad, that must mean you're not prepared. It starts creating all these stories, and then that results in us going in this infinite loop of anxiety. So the only thing you need to do is tell yourself, no matter how good of a public speaker I am, first 60 seconds, I'm going to experience nervousness. There's no way out of it. It is going to happen. It needs to happen. If it doesn't happen, it means it's not even important to me. It will happen. When it happens, I'm going to look at myself like a scientist. This is nothing out of the ordinary. Every human being on the planet who has a heartbeat also experiences this. When you just allow your body to do what it knows how to do, allow it to feel the anxiety, eventually, after about a minute or so, it'll start to taper off. And when you experience this, when you realize, oh, this is actually getting better after the first minute or so, because no emotion lasts forever, I guarantee you it will completely change every single time that you go up and speak, because you know what's going to happen. The certainty is much higher. Because what most of us do, I did this for a long time, we keep fighting it. I hope today is one of those days where I'm not nervous. I hope today is one of those days where I don't stutter. I hope today. You're constantly thinking, will this happen or will it not happen? Will this happen? Will it not happen? And this creates a lot of uncertainty. But you just tell yourself every single time, I'm going to be nervous. There's just no way out of it. Your body accepts it. It doesn't fight the emotions anymore. Allows you to ride into it. And before you know it, you've done it so many times, it no longer bothers you. So number 2, understand the biology and what your body is trying to do when it is preparing you for a speech. All right, number 3 is Memorization. Now, you might be wondering, why is memorizing a bad thing? The vast majority of the presentations that you will do in your life do not require you to say specific words in a specific sequence. Unless you are delivering an address or you are reading from a script, or by the way, the script or the teleprompter is going to be in front of you, you don't need to be in a corporate presentation, or if you're doing stand-up comedy, you don't need to say the same exact word in the same sequence. A few of them can go here or there. The problem with memorization is it is a bit of a crutch, and I know it was for me for a very long time, because we don't have the belief in ourselves to remember what we're going to say. So we feel like, okay, if I memorize everything, then I will feel more confident. But what's the problem with that? The problem with that is, let's say you memorize all of these different paragraphs, every single word. First of all, it's going to take you a long freaking time. It's going to take you a long time to memorize everything. But let's say you are speaking, and then what happens during your presentation? You forget this line. Now you're out of sequence, and you won't know where you are, and you'll forget everything, and you won't know how to get back into it. That's number one. Number two is, because you memorized it, you are going to be even more nervous, because now you are trying to remember what you wrote. You are trying to remember what you scripted. You are trying to remember exactly what you wrote down and how it needed to be said. So you're so attached to your performance that you sacrifice the connection with the audience. Think about it. If someone was so worried about what word they wanted to say that they didn't really care about you and the audience, would you benefit from that talk? Probably not as much. So remember this, the connection with the audience is a lot more important than trying to be perfect. Always prioritize connection with the audience. So when you memorize, in a very real sense, what you are doing is you are increasing the stake. You are increasing the pressure that you will feel. Because now you have to remember everything. There's an added component. You don't have to just deliver it. You also have to remember everything that you're going to say. Let me take this off real quick. So that added element of memorizing makes you even more stressed out. And you don't want that stress because you're already stressed out. So instead of memorizing, you want to have a conversation. Because most people, when they are speaking from notes or they memorized it, it sounds very robotic. It doesn't sound natural. And when something doesn't sound natural, the audience is more resistant to the message. They don't feel like you're talking to them. They feel like you just memorized something and they're just verbally saying the words out loud, but you have no intention of connecting with the audience. And I see this so many times where someone comes and does a presentation and no one is listening and they don't care because they're not even listening to the audience. They just want to get through all the material that they memorized. That's not what you should be doing. You should be in the present moment, listening to people, have a conversation with people. So if I asked you right now, tell me what you did since you woke up this morning and you watched this video, would you be able to tell me everything that you've done? Most likely you can. I woke up in the morning, I went to the bathroom, I brushed my teeth, hopefully. I had some coffee, I went to have breakfast. You can tell me the sequence of it, right? But now if I asked you, memorize the entire thing word by word and then tell it to me, yeah, you can, but you're going to be a lot more nervous about it. And it's unnecessary. You don't need to be nervous about it. It's not something that you needed to memorize in the first place. So a lot of times we use memorization as a crutch because we don't believe in ourselves. And why do we try to memorize it? Because we want to make sure we don't forget our speech. So instead, if we just treat it like a conversation where we've rehearsed it enough times that we know when we can step on stage, we can deliver our presentation without memorizing it. You just memorize a couple of bullet points. I know I'm going to talk about this point, this point, this point. Now you just need to memorize 3 things as opposed to entire paragraphs. It's much easier for you to talk off the cuff. So in a very real sense, memorization creates more pressure, creates more for you to do in order to do a good performance, and therefore creates more anxiety. So the more you can remove the need to memorize, the better you will do. So think about it like this. What are my talking points? What are the 3 things I'm going to talk about? And if you have slides, Your slides will keep you on track. You can't forget because once you've done talking about what's on the slide now, then you look at the next slide. Oh, now I'm going to talk about this thing. Now I'm going to talk about the next thing. And if you're still worried about that, I imagine you don't quite know what you're talking about, because if something's on the screen and you don't know what you're saying, then you haven't rehearsed it. So this is the importance of preparing the material ahead of time, rehearsing it out loud, knowing what you're going to talk about, but do not memorize because it creates even more pressure. Number 4, we're now going to talk about the thoughts. This might surprise you, but some of my clients who had the biggest fear of public speaking, they came to me saying, Yasser, I need public speaking coaching. I need to get better at public speaking. If you make me an amazing public speaker, I will never be anxious again. And unfortunately, that's just not true, because I asked them, okay, let's say I make you the best public speaker in the world. Every word that comes out of your mouth is absolute gold. Will that change the thoughts in your head around whether you are capable, whether you are good, whether people will like you? And 99% of the time, the answer was no. So then I would say, okay, what if we did nothing about your public speaking skills? We kept them exactly where they are, but we changed the thoughts that go on in your head. We change what you think about right before and during a speech. Will that solve your problem? And a much higher percent of the time, they said yes. So then we're not trying to build a skill set of public speaking, which, yes, when you build a skill set, you do have an increase in confidence, but some people are already very good public speakers, but they just don't know how to treat their thoughts. They just don't know what to do with their thoughts. So I'm going to share with you 2 things, or rather 3 things, that have really helped me. The first one is, I'm going to call it Bob. I'll explain this in a bit. One of my coaches taught me, if I am thinking about something in my head that I'm worried about, let's say I'm about to step on stage and my brain says, people will hate you, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not qualified, my brain is trying to convince me to be nervous. It's trying to keep me safe. It's trying to get me not to do that. So what my coach said is, I don't want you to think this is you saying it. I want you to name an entity in your mind whose sole responsibility is to sabotage you. The only goal is to make sure you don't do well. So name this person. So I named it Bob because I couldn't think of anything else. So now every time I get a thought, you're not going to do well. Oh, this company wants to hire you for a keynote. You're not qualified. Say no immediately. At first, I'm a little scared. And then I think, oh, this is Bob. This is what Bob is supposed to do. Bob is supposed to sabotage me. That's all this entity is known to do. Now I recognize it. So imagine this. Let's say you're in school and there's a bully who comes to you and said, hey, you're really ugly. Day 1, you might be pretty upset. Oh, why is he saying I'm ugly? I don't want to hear this. But then day 2, day 3, day 4, at the exact same time, the bully says the exact same thing. Eventually, when you get to day 14, 15, 20, 30, it doesn't really bother you anymore because, again, you know what's going to happen. You know how this works. You've gotten used to it. You know the tricks. A lot like when you see a magic trick, but you know how the magic trick works, you're not really impressed because you see right through it. It doesn't have that same effect on you. So in the same way, the thoughts won't go away around your public speaking. Oh, you will do terrible. You're not prepared. You need to memorize. You didn't rehearse 500,000 times. There's no way you can do this. Instead of you believing those thoughts, you can just say, hey, this is Bob. This is what Bob does. Bob is trying to sabotage me. I get the trick. I'm not going to fall for it. You will be surprised how effective this is. Because then you learn to differentiate between what's real and what scenarios your mind is creating. Because I remember I used to get all these companies reaching out to me from industries that I had never heard of, right? Like finance or pest control. And I'm thinking, I have no experience with pest control. What am I going to talk to these people about? But that, again, was Bob doing his work. Like, hey, let's not do this. You don't know what to do with it. The risk is too high. Instead of me recognizing, hey, this is a challenge, I can learn it and I can deliver. So create an entity in your mind, label the entity, and whatever thought comes up that does not support where you want to go, that is Bob's doing. Now, you can give it a better name, and if your name is Bob, I apologize. I'm sure you're a wonderful person, just not the Bob in my head. So number 1 is to create a separate identity for the person in your mind that is sabotaging you. Number two in this element about thoughts is when you are getting these thoughts in your head, where is your focus? What are you focusing on? So, for example, when you're playing a sport like ping pong or tennis or jujitsu, you're so in the moment. You're not actually thinking. There's no thinking going on in your brain. Because of that, you're in the motion, your automatic brain, your intuitive brain is just doing all the action without you actually having to think about it. So you're not focused on the end outcome. You're not focused on, will I win? Am I doing better? But the moment you start to shift your focus away from that, what happens is all of your skill set, all of your memory is stored in one part of the brain. And all the conscious and analyzing part of the brain is stored in a different part of the brain. So what you want to do is you want to be in the part of the brain that has all the information so you can perform well. So when you memorize it, at first you're consciously thinking of the material, and then when you set it enough times, it goes to this part of the brain where it becomes automatic. A lot like the first time you tied your shoelaces, you didn't quite know what you were doing, but then the more times you did it, it became automatic. So it started in the conscious mind, then it went to the automatic mind. So what happens is when you are doing something you know how to do, you're playing tennis, you're playing ping pong, you're in the motion. You know what you're doing. You're on stage talking about the thing you know how to talk about. You're automatic. It's just flowing out of you. But then someone comes in, or someone's checking their watch, or someone's late, someone's talking. Now you switch from the automatic brain to the conscious brain. Oh, what is happening? Why is this person not looking at me? Am I doing well? Does my boss? Now all of a sudden you're conscious. And when you are conscious, remember, you're in a different part of the brain. All of the things that you know how to do are stored in the automatic. So the way to switch from the conscious brain to the automatic part of the brain is to get back in flow state, meaning focus on the present moment, focus on what is happening. So for me, right before a presentation, the last thing that I'm thinking about is what's on my slides, how will I do, I hope I impress people. I give myself one thing to focus on to distract myself. So what I'll do is I will pace left and right at the venue, and I'm just going to count my steps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'll count up until 500 sometimes, because when I'm counting, my mind is so occupied, it can't really do anything else. Some people like to play a game on their phone. Some people like to jump around, do push-ups. Whatever gets you in the present moment and helps you focus, that's important. So what you want to train yourself to do is focus on the present moment, and then eventually your mind will run around and, oh my God, what is happening? Am I getting nervous? Do people hate me? Oh, I'm doing that thing again. Let me bring it back to the present moment. And when you're on stage, your present moment could be your slide. It can be the audience. That's what I prefer. It could be every word coming out of your mouth. It could be how your body's moving. Whatever you can focus on right now in the present moment to distract you so much that you can't really think about anything else. And try this exercise with me really quickly, okay? Close your eyes. Just trust me on this one. Close your eyes. And for 20 seconds, just think about something that really, really terrifies you when it comes to public speaking. Maybe you step on stage and you bomb, whatever it might be. Just imagine that for 20 seconds, okay? I'm just going to pause the video real quick. Okay, you can open your eyes now. Here's what I want you to do. Keep that image fresh in your mind. Okay, keep that image fresh in your mind. But now bring all of your awareness to your left hand. All of your awareness to your left hand. Now, bring all of your awareness to the left thumb. Okay, and you can wiggle it left and right like this. Just do this real quickly. Left and right, left and right. Now let it go. Keep your hand straight like so. Bring all of your awareness now to the right hand and open it like so. Just become really aware of your right hand. And now bring all of your awareness to the thumb and just wiggle your thumb left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. All right, I'm going to stop. Now you're going to hold up both of your thumbs like so. And I want you to do alternate movement. So you're going to do left, right, left, right, left, right. Almost like you're piloting a fighter jet and you're pressing the button. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Okay? Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to do it with a thumb and the pointing finger here. So we're going to do left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Just keep doing that. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Now stop for a second. How much were you thinking about that image that you had in your mind about the worst possible scenario in those 15 seconds we did that exercise? If you did it correctly, you weren't thinking about it at all. And the reason for that is your focus was so much in the present moment of what is happening right now. What is the task at hand, that all of the thoughts completely shut down. So this is what you're trying to replicate on stage. You are trying to recognize, oh, I've got this negative thing, but I can bring it right back. I can focus on the present moment. So this is the importance of focusing on the present moment, not on the outcome, not on all the thoughts, not on everything that can go wrong. Just focus on the present moment. So we've talked about the internal saboteur. We talked about focusing. The third thing I want to focus on is just letting go of these emotions. One of the things that I really struggled with was when I experienced something in my body, I was not familiar with that and I kept resisting it. So for example, if I was about to step on stage, I kept saying, I hope I don't get anxious. I hope this is one of those times where I'm not nervous. I don't want this to happen. Oh my God, I wish this doesn't happen. I'm resisting the emotion that my body is creating. How difficult is it to remove an emotion? It's very difficult. It's almost impossible. But we try to do it anyway, right? I wish I never felt nervous. No human being, unless you're a psychopath, has that. Everyone feels it. Everyone. It's just about how you manage it. So there's a really good book called Letting Go, which talks about this. I forget the name of the author, but something Dawkins, I remember. But the technique is when you were experiencing this fear or you're experiencing the anxiety, a lot like we discussed the biology earlier, you allow your body to feel it and run its course. So I'm feeling anxious. Instead of, oh my God, I hope I don't get anxious. Oh my God, every time I get anxious, I hate it. Get familiar with it. I know what my body feels like. I know my stomach tends to tighten up. I know my breath gets really heavy. My mouth dries up. I start sweating. These are all the feelings that I have in my body. My job is just to sit through this and allow it to come and go. Because the more you battle it, the more tension it creates and the more difficult the experience tends to be. So you'll find this, that even when you are experiencing these emotions and you still step on stage and you still go through it and it's not the best performance in the world, you feel relieved that you did it. You feel like, oh, thank God I allowed this emotion to come up and go. So when you do this repeatedly, where you allow the emotion to come up and go and come up and go, you become so familiar with what your body does and how it operates. A lot like when you're lifting weights at the gym. You know what the weight feels like. You have some idea what to expect when you have those weights up. Similarly, you'll know what your body does in that situation. And when you have more familiarity, what happens? Higher level of certainty. When you have higher level of certainty, you have higher level of confidence. So if you are trying to treat your thoughts, make sure you don't fall to prey to your negative thoughts. The three things that you will do. 1, create a separate identity. So you don't say, I am nervous, I feel like I'm going to fail. You're just going to say, Bob is telling me X, Y, Z. This is what Bob does. This is their job. And I'm not going to fall for it. Number 2, where is your focus? Is your focus on the present moment? Is your focus on what is happening right now? And number 3, whenever an emotion comes up, you will not resist it. You will teach your body what it's like to experience it, what it's like to go through the emotion. Because the moment you go through that emotion, your body will say, oh, something wrong is happening. Why are you feeling this way? No. That means your brain is telling you, hey, we don't know what's going on here. Why are you not getting rid of this? Why are we not doing everything we've always done? Why are we not going into our old patterns of thinking? Because the brain does not want to change. It wants to stay the same. So this means you are making progress. So these are the 3 things. If you can just tackle these 3 things, that alone will help you tackle your anxiety and your anxious thoughts around public speaking. There are 4 main things that we talked about today to help you overcome your fear of public speaking. The first one is the rehearsal process. Then we talked about memorization and why you shouldn't do it unless you absolutely have to. Just memorize the points and then go into your talking points. Rehearse it enough times where you know what to talk about. Then we also talked about the biology. What does your body do? How long the emotion stays. And if you just allow yourself to feel the emotion, and not think of it as something that's an anomaly. You'll do fine. And then we talked about our thoughts and how to deal with the thoughts. You make sure that you don't fall for the thoughts that you get as your own, as reality. You create a separate entity around that. You make sure you're focused on the present moment. And number 3, you are letting go and you're teaching your body what it's like to feel that emotion and let go of it. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you did. And if you did, go watch this video next. It's going to help you out. Take care.